One of the problems we had in this studio is people recognized it in other podcasts and they're like, oh, I kind of want my podcast to look different. I'm pretty sure this school's haunted, but in the end, it's kind of cool. It's a fun vibe. Yeah, we try to be as hands-on as we can so our clients can be as hands-off. If you have awesome processes, then it's easy to teach somebody else to do it. With AI coming out, with just how podcasting has evolved, you just have to keep up with what's going on, what's working. Bend over backwards for your first few clients. Make them happy, even if it means you're gonna lose money. It's so interesting just talking to another studio owner.
Well, Talmage, thanks for being on the show, man. How's it going?
Dude, I'm excited to be part of it. It's going good.
Yeah. Now you're out in Utah, and I love y'all's like studio. First of all, it's in an old school. Is that right?
Yeah. It's like 100-year-old school. The room I'm sitting in right now, I'm pretty sure it was the coal room where they'd store all of the coal. Because when we were cleaning it out, like just this coal dust would fall on us and we'd blow our nose that night and it would just be black. And so, yeah, cleaning it out was kind of scary. I'm pretty sure this school's haunted. But in the end, it's kind of cool. It's a fun vibe.
Yeah. So I guess there's something similar near where I live, where they took an old school, like the high school moved to a new updated high school. And now that old decommissioned high school, they're like renting it out to different businesses. And there's a bar and there's a restaurant and there's like an ice cream shop and stuff like that. And I toured it and I thought about doing a studio in there, but it didn't quite work out for my needs. But it's great to see like another company doing that. And y'all done a great job, right? Because y'all have shared your progress on YouTube and like, yeah, y'all have outfitted that thing and it looks pretty solid.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun. Most of the time when we bring clients down here, they're either thinking it's super cool or that they're about to get kidnapped. And we're like, hey, don't worry. You're chill. You're safe. But yeah, it's funny.
Nice.
It's definitely a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle vibes once you come down here.
That's great. That's the best vibe you can go for.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. So you work within a company called FilmLaab, and we were talking, your siblings also work in there in FilmLaab. So kind of give me the scope of what FilmLaab does.
Yeah, so FilmLaab is a video production company out of Salt Lake, Utah. We're just south of Salt Lake in Draper. But yeah, we've done a lot of commercial projects, stuff for like the Jazz, Sephora, Dime Beauty, Boston Celtics, and just like a lot of cool brands that way. And then about 3-ish years ago, I was doing freelance podcast production. And then my brother was like, he's the one that started FilmLaab, Mitchell Thayne. He was like, hey, why don't you just come on to FilmLaab and build out our podcast department? And so I joined FilmLaab 3 years ago, and we've been building it out, moving from space to space, getting better studios, better clients, been able to do some pretty cool stuff, worked with Mr. Beast on an episode. And so, yeah, it's been fun.
Nice. How did you initially get into podcasting?
Yeah, so my dad, he's a marriage and family therapist, and he would work from home a lot, and I would hear him talking to parents that are bringing teens home from these treatment programs, and a lot of times these teens would go right back into their bad habits, bad friend groups and everything. And so he'd kind of train these parents on how to bring them back and help it be successful. And as I was like listening to him, because he'd be on these calls all day, every day, I was just like, Dad, you should just start a podcast. I actually learned what podcasting was back in 2019. So honestly, pretty recently. And then he's like, oh, I don't want to have to learn how to do that. I was like, I will figure it out. You need to start a podcast because there are so many parents out there that need this kind of help. And so YouTube was my best friend. I figured it out and then got into podcasting that way. And once I did it for him, I started doing it for other people and then was doing freelance podcasting for like 2.5 years.
So when clients come in to your studio, what are you giving them? Are you recording everything? And then you do social media snippets? Do you help them with producing the show? Kind of like how far do you go with them?
Yeah, we try to be as hands-on as we can so our clients can be as hands-off as they want to be. And so we'll kind of talk to them about their needs. And so we will do everything from consulting them on the flow of the show, what makes a good podcast, to helping them find guests, to recording it, obviously, editing it, making social media cut downs of it, and then publishing it. So that includes copywriting, the titles and descriptions, designing thumbnails for YouTube, and then actually scheduling it to go out. We have played around with some social media management, and that's probably going to be a part of our business moving forward. We just need to find the right partner for that. And then we're also getting into like more of the marketing and monetization. But I would say our bread and butter right now is mainly the consultation and production.
Yeah. And do you have like a small team? Because I know like the more podcasts you bring on, the more time it's going to take. And so if at least from personal experience, like when it was just me and I would have one show, that's fine. I could do that all day. I can record one show. I can edit it. I can add music. I can do the social medias. I can manage that. But then when you get a second show, it gets a little bit more time, it consumes a little bit more of your time. So especially if you have multiple shows a week, having multiple people to help you along is definitely a bonus. So do y'all have like a team that does podcasting?
Yeah. So right now we have 4 people on the team, including myself. One of them is like a project manager, and she helps out with a lot of other stuff here at FilmLaab's. So she's really part-time. But the other 2 guys, they're full-blown podcast producers. So they know how to record everything. They know how to edit everything. And that's been fun. That's been really fun to build up and not have to work solo on it anymore. That being said, training is tough because there's some things about podcasting, especially podcast production. It's not the most sexy thing out there. You're not shooting for the Boston Celtics or Utah Jazz. You're sitting in a studio and kind of doing some redundant things every day. And so finding somebody that has the desire is kind of difficult, but also teaching people how to edit podcasts. It's just a whole different style of editing. And so what I usually do when I'm like talking to people, interviewing them for the job, is I'll send them a mock episode and then have them edit it. But the thing I look at most is their social clips they make, because editing a podcast isn't super difficult, but cutting down a social media clip, finding a good spot, cutting it down from 5 minutes to sub 60 seconds and making it flow well, have a good hook, have a satisfying ending, having one principle, not 2, because 2 will just distract the viewer more. It's a lot more difficult than you think. And so that's the thing I'm usually looking out for when hiring for this position, as well as the thing we probably focus on the most in our training.
Nice. Now, when y'all are doing those socials, are y'all doing it manually all the time, or do y'all use like one of those newer AI models like Opus Clip or Riverside? Yeah. We
do it all manually. I think Opus Clip has its place, but you never, I don't know. I'm kind of a snob. I don't want any of the podcasts we produce to, I don't know, have Opus Clip doing its stuff, because then it just reflects poorly on us. And so what I've told some clients, I'm like, hey, if you want extra content made out of this, by all means use Opus Clip, but post it on like a fan account, not on your personal brand account, because you don't want to bog down your brand account with subpar content.
Beyond the Studio is produced and recorded at Round Rock Studio, the perfect space to bring your visual ideas to life. Round Rock Studio is a photography and production studio with a 20-foot by 20-foot cyclorama wall. The studio has built-in lights, essential grit gear, and even a client green room, setting you up for a successful shoot. Round Rock Studio also offers podcast recording in their state-of-the-art podcast room, including microphones, cameras, lights, and everything you need to get your podcast out into the world. Go to roundrock.studio for more information. Round Rock Studio, a place for creatives to be creative.
Yeah, makes sense. Y'all's clients, one of the biggest things, like obviously when running a business, is you can build the studio and you can know how to run the studio, and it could be the best looking studio in the world. But if you're not getting clients coming in paying you, then it's a failed business. And so one of the biggest parts of the business is finding those clients. And how do y'all find new clients?
Honestly, we've been pretty lucky because we have two branches of our business. One, the main production arm that does those cool campaigns, and then the podcast department. We honestly have not done a great job at marketing the podcast department. But since we have that other arm, whenever we're out on jobs, we're constantly talking to people. So most of the clients we have coming in is through word of mouth or people just randomly finding our website. And that's actually one of our big focuses here in 2025. We're going to just start making a lot of content around podcasting, what we do, like renting out the studio, because word of mouth is the best way to get clients, but you can't always rely on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think we're in a similar boat. This year, we're going to be pushing marketing a whole lot more for podcasting. Yeah, but in the past, it's just been kind of word of mouth, but it's also been people organically finding us, and it's been working for the most part, right? Like we've been able to keep our doors open and stuff like that. But I think if you really want to succeed and you really want to crank it up to the next level, you have to do like intentional marketing. You can't just rely on word of mouth, right? Or affiliate marketing. Like I guess word of mouth is kind of the original affiliate marketing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll push Facebook ads coming up, and we also have a podcast that we're producing of our own that highlights the local business leaders.
Oh, nice.
So within our area, so we're in like the Austin area in North Austin in a town called Round Rock. So we're bringing in different business owners in Round Rock and having a conversation with them, and then that gets shared on LinkedIn around all the people. So that's kind of one of our marketing pushes that we're doing this year to get our name out there to the local businesses. So shifting off that, you have two different sets, is that right? Or do you have three?
Yeah, so we're kind of in the middle of switching a bunch of things up here. So this is one of the sets, and honestly, we kind of just threw this together last minute, as you know, but the audience might not. And so it's not set up how we usually would have it for a remote podcast. But yeah, this is one of our sets. This is called The Duo. As I said before, it was in the basement of this old school. Cleaning it out was a pain, but once we got it built, it's looking pretty good. We also have a psych wall. We've done some podcasts off of the psych wall as well. It's like just a 12 by 12 small psych wall. We just got rid of one of our studios. It was even smaller than this one, and we've turned that into the gear closet. But we're currently working on a new project. We're calling it the Trio Studio, and I am really excited about that one. I'll tell you a little bit about it. So one of the problems we had in this studio is people recognized it in other podcasts, and they're like, oh, I kind of want my podcast to look different. And we're like, yeah, we get that, but we can change the lighting and you can bring in any decor and it'll kind of switch it up, but it's not different enough. And so we wanted to make our next studio we built modular. And so I had the idea of creating these modular walls. At first I was thinking like hanging plywood up around the wall near the ceiling, and that we could like just take off and put on with hooks. And as I researched that more, I realized that probably wasn't going to work. Recently, we have talked to some museum wall companies, and they actually want to partner with us, sponsor us on our YouTube, and then we'll probably deck out the room with that. And one of the wall sets is going to be walnut. And so just picture this. It's going to be a Ralph Lauren cigar lounge type vibe in this studio.
Nice.
And so I'm super excited about that one. The other set's going to be a more earth tone, feminine, light, airy, white wall studio. And the third set in that same room will just be kind of like a gray backdrop, and then some of the same furniture that will probably switch in and out. And so, we're really excited about that project and documenting the whole thing as we go.
Yeah. So the walls from the museum company, they're just like interchangeable walls?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Nice.
a lot of these museum exhibits, they have to move from city to city because they're just like doing this tour showing the Mona Lisa in New York and then in LA. And so they've created this really nice wall panel system. And so we're getting those. And the one problem with it is it has a seam between each panel. And so these panels are usually like 4 by 8 feet or 4 by 10 feet. And the seam is just kind of a giveaway that it's a false wall. Yeah. And so what we're planning on doing is putting board and batten in. So like horizontal board or vertical boards and horizontal boards to cover up those seams and make it look like just a classy looking room with some nice trim work.
Yeah, and that is always one of the challenges is that, when you have a podcast set, it's all going to look the same for all the shows that come through. Mm-hmm. And you're right. You can change some of the colored LED lighting, and you can change the books and add like some of your own decor. But that's definitely one of the challenges. And so, I've seen a bunch of podcast studios, and we actually have 2 sets here. We have the set that I'm in right now, and then a set out there that we do.
Oh, nice.
And we're going to be changing up this set to kind of be like a solo set. So one person looking at the camera, and then we're going to move this 2-person set out there just to kind of switch it up.
Nice.
And it also, like, when I look back at how this room started, because this was the very first podcast room that we had here, and we just made it with like what we had. You know what I mean? Like
just scrappy, just making it work.
Yeah. You make it work, and it works, and it looks good. But after a month or two, we iterated and we added some curtains and we added some panels and we added some plants, and so it slowly evolved to look way better than it initially had. Mm-hmm. So it's always fun to like look back a year prior to see where your sets were and to see even where you were like technically, like when we were producing podcasts back then, they're not as good as the ones that we do now, which is good, right? If you were to look back and be like, oh, it's the same, then that means you're not growing at all.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So y'all have a room called the Quad, or is that one that y'all removed?
Yeah, so this was the Quad, this room that I'm in right now. But the problem is it gives the impression that it's for a 4-man podcast, which we can do 4-man podcasts in here. It's just a little tight. And so we're switching up some of the names. It's going to take some getting used to for our team and for our clients. But so, we have the duo right now, right here, and then the trio that we're building upstairs, and we're reserving the Quad, the name, for when we get a studio that's just much bigger. Like in the trio, we can still do a 4-man podcast, but just reserving the name for a bigger studio.
Like, talk to me about the nuts and bolts. How do you design the set? Do you start with a 3D model? Do you start with sketches? Do you have a consultant that you hire who's like separate from you and your team? Like, kind of walk me through that process.
Yeah. So what we did, we found this space. It's in the same building. We went in there, kind of measured it out. We're like, okay, if we were to do a podcast in here, how would we orient it? And then I just started sketching, pencil and paper, coming up with ideas, trying to figure out how we can make it modular. Once we kind of landed on the idea of these modular walls, then I just put out a notice on Instagram, just being like, hey, look, I'm looking for a designer, an interior designer. If anybody's down and wants to be part of building a studio that's going to be seen by millions of people, hit us up. And so we had a lot of people hit us up. We ended up landing on a girl named Kendall Designs, and she's awesome. We told her our focus and our dilemma of like, hey, we want 3 different sets in here, but we need a lot of the furniture to work with all 3 different sets. Can you make that happen? and she's killed it. So we actually have ordered a bunch of the stuff already. We had the couch and the rug come in today, so we're excited to start putting some of that stuff together. But yeah,
Nice.
definitely working with outside parties is huge, because I did everything for this studio myself, and that was a huge mistake. I think that it ended up turning out great. It's really good, but it could have been so much better if I asked for help. And so I'm actually going to ask Kendall to come down here, help us redesign it, make it look a little bit better. And so, yeah, she's one of the partners. Some of the other partners we're hoping to work with are those museum walls, that company that supplies those, and then a lighting company, seeing if they want to help us with that too. And so definitely work with people.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of people out there who are better at that little piece of the puzzle than we are.
Yeah.
You know, even if we're pretty good at set designing, there's somebody out there that has dedicated their entire career to interior design, and they'd be more than happy to come in and work with you.
And that's the same argument we give to people when they're wanting to start a podcast. It's like, hey, you could totally do this. Like, I know people that have successful podcasts just by talking into their phone, but we do this all day, every day. This is our career. If you want it to be that much better, then just go with us.
Do you typically like recommend a set when people come in and they say, hey, I want to do a podcast? Do you kind of point them to which set they're wanting to do? Because I can imagine everyone, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people probably want to shoot on the cyc wall.
Yeah.
But the cyc wall probably takes a whole lot of setup to do
every
a
time.
podcast episode. Whereas if you're shooting in the duo or the trio, when you get it going, it's just a few buttons and then boom, you're up and running. So do you kind of direct them into like which set?
Yeah. So in our onboarding meeting, usually what we do is we talk about what their goals are, who their audience is, what the whole vibe of their podcast is. And once we kind of are able to, most of the time they don't even know what it is yet, because they're just kind of ideating. And so it's nice for us to like talk to them about it. But once we kind of get that nailed down, then I'm like, okay, I think that this studio would look the best if we're going for that kind of vibe. And most of the time they're chill with it, but sometimes they're like pretty adamant about one studio over the other, and that's chill too. With the cyc wall, it definitely takes a lot more setting up, just because every podcast is different, and we're constantly doing different shoots down there. And so currently we have like 2 clients that use the cyc wall.
Nice. So you just set up every time from scratch, basically, for them?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that usually takes around like 45 minutes to set up, make sure everything's looking good before they show up.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have ran into after doing this for a few years?
Just keeping up with the innovations. That's been a huge one. With AI coming out, with just how podcasting has evolved, you just have to keep up with what's going on, what's working, and some things that are going to help your workflow be so much faster. Because if you don't keep innovating, you will end up dying. And so that's been a big one. Also, kind of going back to the training and employees helping us with this. It's finding the right people. I think that's been a really tough thing for us, finding people that want to build something like this. And because like a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, I'm down to work in podcasting as long as I can end up working on the other shoots like the Utah Jazz or Boston Celtics. And so they've kind of used it as to like get a foot in the door rather than to build up this part of the business. Yeah. And I totally get that. And I respect that. I'm like, hey, I get it. It's more sexy. But what we're looking for is somebody that wants to be here and build this part of the business.
How do you find those people? Because I think we run into that issue as well, where, you know, people come in and they may be an editor for, they may be like a wedding film editor, but that's different than a podcasting editor. Yeah. So how do you kind of find those qualified people?
I think a huge part is doing work for ourselves. That has garnered a lot of recognition inside of the creator space.
Yep.
So if we ever feel shorthanded, we could just post on our socials and just say, hey, we're in need of an editor for this project, or somebody to be a second cam on this project, or hey, we really need a new podcast producer. And once we do that, we've been lucky enough to have a lot of people respond. I think the last time we put out a notice saying like, hey, we're hiring, we had, I think 95 or more people respond to that, just saying like, hey, here's my resume. Here's like, I'm down for this. And so we've been lucky. And I think that's just because we've really focused on making content for ourselves, but inadvertently, it really caters to the creative space here in Utah.
Yeah. If you were to go back and like, let's say it was only you, like just hypothetically, it was only you doing podcasting right now. If you had to hire one person to like help fill the gaps and like help you out in your podcast production, what role would that be?
I would say another podcast producer, somebody that can both record and edit. I think I can handle the consultation, the sales, the onboarding, helping people get started, and also just like recording it with them the first couple times to make sure we get it exactly how they want. But just having somebody take that workload off of me is huge. Just this past year, when we've been able to hire some more people for this, it's been such a weight off my shoulders that I don't have to record and edit every single episode. So definitely a producer.
Yeah, I think it's good for somebody like to take off a lot of the technical aspects of the job. Once you get to a certain level, it's kind of important that you are not the technician within the company anymore. Yeah. When you start out, you're going to be the technician, you're going to be the operator, you're going to be the creative visionary, you're going to be everything. But if you can take off the technical part of your job pretty early on and then only focus on the higher level creative marketing type stuff and sales, then yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, 100%. That's what we're really focusing on this year. But I actually wanted to ask you a question. One of the things that another hard thing that we've run into over the past 3 years of doing podcast production is finding the right fit of clients. I don't know if you've experienced this, but a lot of times hobbyists want to work with us because we do produce like really good looking, really good sounding podcasts, and it's just really well, it's just put together really well. But hobbyists don't always have the budget for a legit podcast production with them not needing to have their hands in everything. And so what have you guys done with that? Is it just like a pricing problem where you're just like, okay, we're just going to have to raise up our prices so we find the right audience or right clients?
Yeah, I think for us, we stumble in that as well, where there will be people show up and they're hobbyists and they want to start a podcast, and we're all for that. Like we all want to achieve their goals, and you never know, maybe you'll get
100%.
A diamond in the rough where they are a hobbyist, but after one season, they're rocking and rolling and they want to continue doing that. But we've also definitely run into the hobbyists who do a few episodes, or maybe they even do a season, but then they run out of fuel. They run out of that passion to continue going. And then, of course, they run out of the budget to go towards the podcasting. So, yeah, I guess if you get to the point where you have enough interest in your studio to where you can then kind of turn people away, I would turn those people away, because you can usually kind of tell if somebody comes in and they're not, they might be serious about it, but you can usually tell if they're not in it for like the right reasons, or if maybe they're putting the cart before the horse. Like we've had clients where they want to do a podcast, but then we kind of look at their business model and their business isn't really solid, right? So they're wanting to do podcasting, which is essentially a marketing campaign before they actually have their business solid. And so we're not business consultants, so we don't help them on the business part of it. And I always like to also let people know that like they don't have to rent the studio to start a podcast. Like we would love to produce their podcast and host it and use our expertise to make it look amazing and sound amazing and perform amazingly. But if you don't have the budget to invest hundreds of dollars per episode, then you can easily do it at home, right? And we'll help you get the right equipment. We'll consult with you. We'll even set it up for you if you want. But yeah, so it's kind of, I don't know, you kind of just have to take it. You take every client as a unique situation.
100%.
Yeah. Do y'all do consulting? Like if somebody wants to do if somebody wants to set up their own podcast set, is that something that y'all help them with?
Yeah, we do that a lot actually. Because a lot of times people just want their own space. They want to make it as easy as possible. So when they have 30 minutes, they can run downstairs with their camera, film something. And so we'll like put together a custom gear list around their needs and their budget. And then also kind of just help them walk through kind of our onboarding process of what is this podcast? Who's the audience? What are their needs? And how are you getting it, like fulfilling their needs? And what is in it for you? And so we'll kind of walk them through that and then just kind of set them on a trajectory saying like, hey, this is probably the easiest way to do it by yourself with this software and with this kind of frequency of posting. And that's been really good. One of the questions I've been asking people just to make sure that they're in it for the right reasons. I actually learned it from Ben Wilson. He's the host of the How to Take Over the World podcast. Really good podcast. You should check it out. It's all about like historical figures and how they took over the world. So Napoleon Bonaparte, Steve Jobs, Alexander the Great, just some of these like big figures. And he kind of just breaks down how they did it. But people always come to him because he has like a side business helping people with podcasting. And they're like, okay, we want to start this podcast about, I don't know, this in this space. Let's say we want to start a podcast about women in the dental space. And he's like, oh, sick. Would you personally listen to a podcast like that if there was already one that existed? And then they're like, yeah, of course. And then he would say, sick. Well, there actually is one of those already. Like I could send it over to you. And there's usually one of two reactions. Either they're like, oh, sick. Yeah, please send that over. Or they're like, dang it, somebody beat me to it. And the people that are excited and they're like, oh yeah, please send that over. They're always the ones that do so much better with podcasting because they would listen to it anyway. They have that fire to learn about that subject, even if somebody else is doing it. And once you realize that you're in it for the right reasons, you're just going to stick with it so much longer than the person that's in it for the fame or just because they got to it first. Yeah,
I agree. I used to do YouTube back in the day. I'm doing YouTube a little bit more now, but like back in the day, I would do tutorials and stuff. And then, when I would research the topic of the tutorial that I was doing, I would see that there's already a bunch of tutorials out there and people doing what I was wanting to do. So it would discourage me, and then I would eventually not even produce the content. So there's always going to be competitors out there who are doing it probably even better than you are right now. But it's hard to not get discouraged, but you kind of have to force yourself to not get discouraged whenever competition comes up.
Yeah, because you could look at those tutorials and you could say, oh, sick, this is really great stuff. Some stuff that I had no idea about, but they forgot to mention this. Or there's this problem I ran into, and I'm sure somebody else is going to have that same problem. So I'm going to take some of the good things that they did and then make it my own and put it out anyway. And I think it's really important that as you're concepting your podcast, you make it as niche as you can. That'll definitely make it a lot easier for you to succeed. But also just to keep in mind that you don't own the idea. So you just have to work hard, be your best, but also just be authentic with how you deliver things.
Hey, real quick, thanks so much for listening. I just wanted to pop in here and say that it means a lot that you took time out of your day to listen to Beyond the Studio. So thank you so much. We've got a lot of fun stuff planned for this podcast. We have a lot of smart and talented people who have opened up their own studio. So if you found any value in here, I would love if you could like and share. And also if you have any tips or questions, send them to us. I'd love to get a conversation going on all these episodes of Beyond the Studio. So, okay. Thanks so much. You guys are awesome. We'll see you. Yeah. It's also great to like personally speaking, it's great to make something for myself, right? Because like in the industry, we're constantly making videos for clients, right? They're paying us money to make a video for their vision, right? Or for their product. And the same, if you're running a podcast studio, you're making podcasts for other people constantly. And so oftentimes we forget to create content for ourselves. And I think that's why a lot of us got into this industry in the first place, was because we were a photographer and we liked taking cool pictures of our friends or videos or like whatever it may be. Like we started as an artist creating for ourselves initially. And then of course you create a business out of it and then you kind of lose that, the ability to make stuff for yourself. So
such a common story.
Yeah, exactly. And so personally speaking, like whenever I started this podcast and, dipping into YouTube and stuff, like it's very fulfilling to finally make something for myself. Even if like 2 people watch it, that's fine. That's beside the point. The fact that I'm making something for myself is the reason.
Mm-hmm. It's huge. I love it.
Yeah. And y'all have a pretty successful YouTube channel. And I know y'all are on different platforms like Instagram and all that stuff. And I think it's very important to have like a personal brand for your company and for yourself. And you mentioned you're going to explore that a little bit more in 2025. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So like you said, I got into podcasting because my dad, but then I also created my own podcast. And that podcast has just been pushed to the back burner because I've just been doing a bunch of client work. But yeah, I'm going to be starting that podcast up again here in 2025. We're going to be doing kind of like little mock podcasts where it's going to be called Where Can We Not Podcast. And so we're going to be going to the top of one of Utah's big mountains and doing a podcast up there with Shure SM7Bs and everything. And it's more for the spectacle of like, hey, look, we can do a podcast anywhere kind of thing. And just to like promote ourselves more, just like 10-minute episodes. So nothing crazy. But yeah, just like promoting that kind of stuff, creating stuff for FilmLaab that also has my identity baked into it, the team's identity. So I'm going to have like everybody on my team on the podcast talking about things, just kind of showcasing the different personalities. Because I don't know, I'm biased, but I think our team is awesome. And I think that people... They should share who they are with YouTube, with the world, with everything. And I think that it's going to build a much better brand than if it was solely focused on FilmLaab.
So as far as pricing goes, how do y'all price y'all's services?
Yeah. So we price it kind of depending on, well, obviously depending on their needs and deliverables and whatnot. But in terms of like the studios, let's say we're just pricing out studios. If you're wanting a tech and all of like 3 to 5 cameras, 2 to 4 mics, it's usually going to be looking at around like $300 for that hour-long studio session.
Nice.
Yeah, and so that will get you the studio session, but that doesn't get you all of the editing that goes with that. And so if you're wanting, let's say, an hour-long episode that's been professionally edited, meaning like we go through the entire thing, cutting certain things out, swapping things, colored, obviously, audio mastering, and then let's say creating like 5 social clips, I would say you're looking at around $700 to $750.
$750 for kind of the full complete package.
Yeah.
Do you see that most of your clients fall one way or the other? Are some people just getting the base and some people getting the full shebang?
I would say most of them land in the middle of the road. I would say this is probably the middle of the road where we do the production, like consulting beforehand and then post-production. And so they're usually sitting at around that $750 price range. If they do want to add anything more like publishing, design work or whatever, it can get up to like $850 to $1,000 per episode. And so I'd say most of them land in the middle of the road.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Do you offer like packages? Because we get asked a lot, and I'm never prepared for this answer.
Yeah.
And I think just because it's always like every client's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm never prepared for this answer whenever they ask me if I have like a package or like a membership fee,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if they wanted to come in and record every week or every other week, do I give them a discount? And I'm never prepared for that answer.
Yeah.
And usually we work something out where we have some sort of discount, or maybe we give them a 10 episode package for a slight discount. But do y'all have anything like that?
Yeah, usually I'm the same as you. We're not prepared for that answer just because, again, every single episode, every single podcast we've worked on has been so different from the others, so just customizable, that we've done a bad job at creating packages. And that's something our CFO sales guy is like, we need to like create packages to live on our website so people know exactly what they're getting. Of course, we can always customize it to certain clients' needs, but we need something to live on the website. And that's just something we haven't done yet. But in terms of like contract and like retainer clients, we definitely will give them a discount if they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to come in twice a month, 4 times a month. And we're like, okay, that'll be a 10 to 15% discount depending on how big your show is.
Yeah. That's roughly kind of what we do as well. And it's funny because like, you know, I came from the video production background. Like I still do video production, but that's definitely where I learned all this was video production. And with that, every project is unique. So so like we never list our prices on the website. When a client emails us, every quote is completely custom. You know, every proposal is made from scratch. And so now getting into this world where I have a podcast studio and we rent it out to people, you do have to be a little bit more templatized. Like you have to have your product at a certain price because it's a little bit different than making video commercials, you know, because not every single thing is going to be completely unique. You need to have that base price. But it's funny to hear that, you've experienced similar difficulties with pricing.
It's just interesting. And then sometimes, to be completely honest, there'll be a client that wants to work with you and you just don't want to work with them because you know that they're going to be a nightmare client. And we all have stories like that. But I don't think it's the worst thing to raise your prices in that case, just a little bit, just to be like, hey, for the extra stress that this is going to cause me, a little bit more money will make it more worth it. And that's just something you kind of have to decide on as like a podcast producer, or if you have a partner, you guys have to kind of talk about that. And that's more for like the clients that are wanting to customize it a lot and wanting a lot more than just a podcast studio rental. If it's just a studio rental, like you said, it should be a lot more templatized. People can just click on it and go.
Yeah. Do you ever have people want to like record their own podcast and not use your cameras or your service? They just want the space?
Yeah, we have actually. We're like, okay, well, you can bring all of your cameras and gear, but since you're using the space, we are still not able to shoot in there with our gear. And so it's going to be roughly the same price. So you might as well just use our cameras.
Yeah.
Unless they're just like, I don't know, super adamant about it, or they don't really know how to use cameras and they just want to use their iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a similar conversation that we have as well. If somebody wants to come in and save money, right, they come to the table and they say, hey, would it save cost if we did all the production? And I'm like, honestly, no, because then I'm still not able to use that space. You know what I mean? Like you're still using the space, you're still using my lights, but you may just be using your own camera, but I still have to like pause everything that's going on in that part of the studio, which is going to leave money on the table for any other opportunities. So yeah, it's a very similar situation.
Yeah,
there.
it is. It's so interesting just talking to another studio owner that has come to so many of the same conclusions, and we've had probably very different roads to getting there, but we're just finding out that some things are just universal. Like, hey, if you use the space, we can't. And I don't know what your guys' pricing is, but a lot of times when you first tell people pricing, they're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. It's like, well, you're getting a lot out of it. And you have to remember how much work goes into this. And so with that being said, podcast production is a whole lot cheaper than like a whole video production. Cause like you could go on a shoot for, I don't know, less than a day for like $5,000 and then just have like an editor edit it. So it is pretty reasonable once you look at it that way, but people that just aren't used to podcasting, sometimes they have a little sticker shock.
Yeah. Yeah. We experienced that as well. But again, it's so different than the commercial video production because you're right. With commercial video production, you're dealing with thousands of dollars for a 20 to 30 second video. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty much always going to be a few $1,000. But then with podcasting, it's an hour-long episode and it's $300. So it's definitely like a quality versus quantity type of thing. Like, if you want to open up a podcast studio, you just kind of have to be willing to work for $300 for a podcast. And it's kind of a different mindset shift because you're going to be doing, essentially multiple a day or at least multiple a week to make up that budget.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's something we kind of want to get into where we're kind of catering to different clients with different needs. So maybe someday we just have like a few small studios that are just kind of plug and play, almost like self-serve podcast studios where they just kind of go in, press a button and they can do it. And we rent those out for super cheap, like $50 to $100 an hour. And then we have like a higher tier where we have these more professional studios where we actually have really nice cameras in here. We have a tech in here monitoring everything. And that's going to be your more $300 range kind of client. And so eventually I would love to get there where we have those two different tiers.
Yeah. So for any new studio owners, do you have any kind of simple words of advice to kind of get them going? Because I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who are listening to this who may be wanting to start their own studio, whether it's a podcast studio or a photography studio or kind of, anything related to studio ownership. Do you have any words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, I'd say two things. The first thing that I didn't learn for probably the first 2 years, and I've been getting better this year, but still far from perfect, is nail down your processes. If you have just awesome processes, then it's easy to teach somebody else to do it. And then they can fulfill the recording, they can fulfill the editing if you want to offer that. So yeah, nailing down that process, not just for the production, but also for your client and their guests. So sending out reminder emails and thank you emails and maybe a media release form or a media kit saying, hey, here's all the links for your episode. You can post this on your story and you can post this link and here's a social clip that you guys need to collaborate on or something like that. So it just saves you guys so much of a headache. So nail down your processes. The second one is just bend over backwards for your first few clients. Make them happy. Even if it means you're going to lose money at first, just make them happy with the product. And then just take ownership when you mess up, because you're going to mess up. You're going to lose their episode, whether it's a corrupted file or something went wrong in the audio. Call them. Don't text them that you have a problem. Call them. They'll hear the sincerity in your voice so much more, but just do everything to make it up to them, make them happy, make sure that they love your product. And because they're taking a bet on you, your first couple clients are taking a huge bet on you. And so try to make it so they never regret that bet.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we've had one of our very first clients, I'll say, who's been with us since the beginning. And yeah, they're rock solid. And they took a gamble on us because we were a new studio. And we, of course, took a gamble on them because they didn't have a show up and running yet. And so it was definitely a mutually beneficial relationship there. And now they're still with us. And we've produced tons of great stuff. And they've gone viral on TikTok and all of the above.
Dude,
so
love it.
Yeah, it's definitely and I say this all the time, that we're in the customer relationship business.
Mm-hmm.
We do it in the form of podcasting, but our ultimate goal is to make the customers happy. And that goes from the very initial email that you send them. If that's not professional and if it's not timely, you're going to lose that client or they're not going to have a good time. And it goes all the way through the end when you're recording the episode to when you're sending the final email. It all needs to be professional and they need to have a pleasant time with the experience. Otherwise, they're not going to be back and your business isn't going to grow. So, yeah, we're always in the customer service business for sure.
I love it.
Well, good stuff, man. What else do you like to do up there in Utah outside of podcasting?
Oh, dude, there's so much to do here. Snowboard, ski, that's
Nice.
always fun. This year, the snow's not as great, but usually Utah snow is awesome. I love just hanging out with family, playing sports, watching movies, doing game nights. As long as I'm with good company, I'm having a good time. The creator community up here is actually really good, really strong. There's always meetups going on. And so if you're a photographer, there's constantly just model shoots going on up in the canyons, whether it's you could do it any season of the year because the mountains are just gorgeous anytime. But yeah, and then if you go down southern Utah, you could go to Zion's National Park. That's a really fun place to go for creators. And so, yeah, Utah's a fun place.
Yeah, I've heard it's beautiful. My sister-in-law went recently, and she was talking about how amazingly beautiful it was. How can people kind of find you on the internet?
Yeah, if you can find our website, FilmLaab.com, or follow us on Instagram or YouTube. Just look up FilmLaab. Lab is spelled with 2 A's. YouTube, we're kind of just getting started, but it's starting to grow the past little bit, and so it's kind of fun. But yeah, we're always down to chat with people that have any questions, and so if you have any, feel free to reach out via email or Instagram DMs. Yeah,
and I encourage everyone who's listening or watching to go check out your YouTube channel and there's a specific video where you'll do an overview of the studio, again, that y'all built in a 100-year-old high school. So that's quite fascinating. So yeah, definitely everyone check that out. Well, hey, thanks again for being on the show.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me.